Auditioning is the hell of the theater.
The whole idea of auditioning is stupid. What a strange way to make a decision about something that needs a unique creative process. And then at the other end has probably some real economic pressures on us. You saw that person for how many minutes? You know, and you made a decision. So it's bizarre.
I find it the strangest arrangement, the strangest agreement, right? People come into a room, they pretend they're in a play, they pretend there's a scene partner in the room, the people watching pretend that they're doing that as well, the auditioner pretends the person's not watching. So it's really a very odd and stressful situation.
Does it look like the person who auditioned?
It's often nice if the photo actually looks like the person. So many of the photos bear no resemblance whatsoever to the person and don't help you remember them.
If that photograph looks like the actor, it really helps in trying to sift through. Was that the 5th version of Man in the Moon Marigolds I saw, or was that the 3rd?
It's got to show sort of a relaxed sincerity. It really does. And I don't think it really matters whether it's the shoulders or it's close-up. I mean, there's fads. When I was younger, I think it was chest up, and then it changes to just face, and that stuff shifts a little bit, but primarily it's got to look like you. You can't go to an audition with a 20-year-old picture.
If you're going to hire a professional photographer and get all that stuff printed back when they would do it in a studio, that's a major investment for an actor at any level. So your headshot should be at least 2 or 3 years current to your present appearance. Otherwise, it lends an inadvertent bad reflection on yourself. It makes you seem like you're not current. It's like someone handing out the business cards where you've crossed out the address and the phone number and written a new one in.
It's not a picture that makes you look way more glamorous or beautiful than you actually are, but that is, it shows you what you would look like on stage.
You get to see that person's face. It's clearly lit. It's clearly focused. It's not busy. It's not clever. They're not doing a character. They're revealing themselves. They're looking into the camera and just showing you who they are.
I believe that photos are probably more important for film and television than they are for theater. I think actors get wrapped up and tie themselves in knots over what their photo is. And in fact, for me personally and for most theater producers, the photo is just a reference to remember who you are and what you did.
It gives a certain kind of aura or look to that actor that is both a good reflection of who they are, but also gives you some kind of engaging mystery or something. I don't look at the photo headshot and think, oh, I'm going to cast this person. It's more for me just a memory recognition, where I think, oh, yeah, I know that person. And then I immediately say, oh, yeah, I remember what their audition was like.
A good headshot, like this one, I mean, a good headshot should essentially reflect your personality. And Megan is kind of this. And it's kind of nice here that you get like 2 looks. So here's her charming, fun self, and ooh, here's the glamorous one, just in case you're interested.
I don't like the serious actor headshots, just because they look pretentious, I think. I want to see somebody who's open, willing to engage, somebody who's happy about being there. You know, when I look at the picture, I want to smile too, because I feel like they're, you know, having a good time. They enjoy doing the craft.
I'm not going to judge you if you don't look very good without makeup on, if you're a woman. And if you're a man, there's really nothing you can do much to improve your appearance. Women can do it. They can curl their hair and put makeup on and do all sorts of stuff. Guys don't have a shot.
A good headshot is not an expensive headshot. Even an iPhone can take a fabulous photo. So there's no excuse for something that's blurry. There's no excuse that looks like your photo is taken at a nightclub or a party or on the back deck with the grill going behind you. I'm describing things that I've seen. It could be black or white, or it could be color. It could be printed on glossy photo paper and come from a photographer's studio, or it could be something, again, that you're shooting with a high-quality digital camera that you own or a friend or family member has, printed on a nice paper, but not on an inkjet, and that's simply because, as tends to happen when you've got 100 headshots, sometimes someone's going to set their coffee cup on it, or someone will spill a water bottle, and then suddenly you've got, a big ink slick where someone's photo was.
I wouldn't sweat bullets over it, actually. It's not a determinant. If it's a crappy picture, and you can come in and nail it.
The audition process is really one of the most important things that you do. It can make or break your play. It's something you really have to give a tremendous amount of thought to. So much of it is casting and making sure that you really are choosing people who have a really powerful resonance with the roles you're working with.
First of all, it should be absolutely honest, clearly laid out, uncluttered. If you have a great many credits, then I think you should pick and choose which credits you include on the resume. And usually what you do is you break down the information in categories, whether it's Broadway, off-Broadway, national tours, resident theater productions, television, film, and then usually at the bottom there's a place for a training and special skills. And then, of course, contact information, whether it's personal contact information or agency or management contact information. But all of that has to fit neatly on the 8x10 piece of paper that is attached to the back of the photo.
Variety and clarity is the best thing, easy to read.
Rather than putting in every single thing you've ever done to impress a director, that instead you very carefully choose what you've done so that I can understand what you think is important and understand that you know what's important.
If it's a student, it's not a shame that the work happened in college. You don't have to make up that it's a theater company at the college or use the college theater name as if it's a real theater. I mean, it's a college theater. That's cool.
I think all too often auditors, people watching auditions are looking at the resume more carefully to see who do I know that they've worked with so I can make some small talk afterwards than the real substance of the resume.
If they've worked with people that I know, if they've worked at organizations, theaters that I know, if they've gone to schools that I have attended or worked at, those kind of things pop up because those similarities give points of conversation, and the conversation is probably more valuable to me in an audition context than the resume.
Basically, the resume is just kind of a help, a guideline that might tell you some information about somebody you don't know. So I don't put a whole lot of stock on it, except that it needs to look great and feel professional. Because when people hand you something that looks like they really didn't care, then why should I?
I really could care less about the resume. I think listing classes that you've done, especially when you're just starting out, and who taught those classes, very important.
Who's the musical theater guy or gal that really has never been delivered the T-bone steak of a serious dramatic role? And they're hungry for it. And they are actually the ones who can deliver on the material. If you're doing, say, certain types of dramatic pieces, like, say, a Martin McDonough or a Connor McPherson, maybe you don't really want the person who only does serious drama. You want someone who's got comedic chops and a particular sense of musical theater timing, because they'll understand how to play that dramatic language in the particular idiosyncratic tempo or rhythm that the playwright has encoded in their script. I look at the roles that they've played to see what it might suggest about their background that could both meet a certain expectation of the role we're casting and possibly deliver a bunch of surprises. I've seen resumes that have kind of testimonial quotations, either from reviews or directors or people that you've worked with, which extol your virtue in this or that role or how great you are to work with. That's not something that needs to be included in a resume. If you reach the point where I'm really interested in you, I'll call this and that director who you've worked with to find out, did they do a good job? Are they good to work with? Are they a good person to have in the room? A more sullen or difficult personality who doesn't gel well with the cast, who doesn't take direction, who's overly emotional and creates drama that's not in the script.
When you're in an audition and you've got the resume in front of you, I may look at it for a few seconds. I don't spend a lot of time with it, and most of the time I don't go to the resume unless there's something interesting that's already happening in the audition. I don't start there. The resume is a backup or a confirmation Or sometimes it'll say, oh, well, I should give this person another chance because there's something on here or someone on here that saw value in them that I'm not getting yet.
I want to see the role that they've done. I want to see where they've done it, and I want to see the director. Anything else is sort of superfluous.
For the actors, they should know how hugely subjective this is, and how if you don't get this part, it doesn't mean that you did a bad audition. It may mean that there are so many other conditions going on with the creative team in terms of what they're looking for, or how they're looking for it, or how they've imagined the role. Let it go, move on, go in, have a good time, and get ready for the next one.
I've seen some just god-awful actors with MFAs from great programs, and I've seen some spectacular actors who haven't gotten through the 8th grade.
It's not a huge thing, actually. There's certain programs I know that are strong. I will cotton to those and take a good hard look at those because I know it's pretty rigorous, and they have extraordinary reputations. Some things you pay a little more attention to because you know of a particular rigor, or a particular faculty member there, or it's tougher to get in, tougher to stay in. They've had to go through something. You may pull those people out and see them, but then they're in the room, and then it's all about what happens in the room. That resume is cool to get you in, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Early on when I was directing, I was working at a company and we did an open call audition, and one of the directors said, oh, you can see the training. I think training helps. It's not for everybody, and it's very expensive now, and I think that for actors right now, today, considering what they're going to do post sort of BA, I think it's a real critical question, because you come out of grad school with debts that are enormous.
I don't want to see craft in work. I want to see the character. So although the training lets me know that this person has a certain set of skills, they have a degree of craft that I can depend upon, but it isn't necessary. The most important thing is that audition and that they can take some direction. Experience is way more important than education.
I wouldn't necessarily say that training is the be-all and the end-all. It's ability. And what one finds is that if one has the ability, most of the time the actor is either professionally trained or has had a great deal of experience in the professional theater.
An actor's educational background means almost nothing. You could have a degree from Yale and you could just be not right for the part or not that good an actor. And some people never went to college. They have incredible instincts and skill and talent, and they get cast.
The degree generally is informative in terms of letting you know that the student has had an intense training process with director, another artist, performer, and that they've worked with them on perhaps even on a daily basis, or once or twice a week. And I don't feel like that kind of training is accessible to students who don't go to some kind of a training university or institution.
The best schools can give you a good education on how to continue to grow, can teach you the vocabulary that we all talk about, because acting and directing in theater is a craft. There's a great deal in it. It's like building a house. How do you build a house? You can't build a house unless you go to architecture school or a big building. You can't design one. You have to have an education. Otherwise, your house would probably fall down. I don't know. No one would even dream of doing it, although they do dream of being an actor, because it looks so simple, because it looks like a human being. That's why it looks simple. It's the truth of behavior that speaks in the theater, like vocal truth. Speaking truth is not about speaking loud, it's about speaking truthfully. The truth carries. You can be really loud, just people still can't understand what you're saying, because you don't know what you're saying. You don't understand the inner life of it. And all we go for is to hear the inner life. The goal of training an actor is, how do you train an actor without destroying the childlike creative spirit?
I really don't care if they went to school or they've got a degree. I am interested in the number of things they may have done that constitute training. Whether they've had movement classes, dance classes, do they study with a vocal coach at all? Where I see that you've studied with people who have an ensemble aesthetic, who we know to be training actors who are multifaceted performers, who are not just in their head or in their voice or just doing musical theater. You know, that's instructive, that I make note of.
Oftentimes, people who have MFAs or BFAs, but more like MFAs, are, to me, clearly more skilled, technically skilled actors. It doesn't mean they have more talent necessarily, but you can see the skill level, and that's very clear. There's so many unknowns in the process of rehearsal and performance that if you know somebody has certain skills that they've been trained and have learned and know how to use, that makes the process that much easier. But ultimately, it's about talent. No matter how much training you have, there's a certain level of talent that I want to recognize as a director when I'm auditioning and when I'm casting.
It gives me a sense of what their knowledge might be. It tells me nothing about their abilities and their talent. That's for me to find out with them.
I feel like the auditions are sort of a necessary evil, kind of. I mean, not so much. I really like auditions. I know that actors sometimes hate them, but I enjoy them. It's really fun to see who's coming in. It's fun to see what, you know, people are doing. I meet people. I see what they're doing. I see how they choose to present themselves. And I don't know how else. I mean, maybe it's outdated. Maybe there's some, but I'm sure there's another mechanism. But it feels like the audition is just sort of, it's like one of those things you got to do.
No, I don't want to deal with an agent.
Not in the Twin Cities at all.
Not important.
People don't have agents, do they? I've never encountered one. I mean, I know people do for film and TV and literary.
You might need an agent if you want to do an audition at the Guthrie.
I don't think that agents and managers are important for actors if you are looking to pursue work in the theater in the state of Minnesota. I think they're very important if you're in New York City. It's just they're really not necessary for theater work in the Twin Cities.
This is a town where anybody can call me up and go, "Hi, I'm new to town. Could we have coffee? And will you let me know when your next generals are?" "Oh, sure."
Well, it's actually critical to a production success. So much of the work depends upon who you're collaborating with, and particularly what actors you're working with. So the audition process, it's actually a fairly high-pressured situation for people on both sides of the table.
Sometimes actors dress in the way they think a role is meant to be, and so they think that that's going to help them. And in a way, I think it does, because it reflects two things. One, it reflects, for me, what their image of the character is, and that helps me to decide, is this person way off? I mean, they're coming in this weird outfit and they think that that's what this character's like. So that's one thing, but it also reflects a certain commitment to what they want, how seriously they take coming to the audition. So those are aspects of it. I mean, I once heard a story where the actor said he shaved his head in order to come in and do the role, and you know, that's going out there. But on the other hand, he got the role.
It's a very bad idea to wear a costume to an audition. A very bad idea. It's almost insulting, I think.
I always thought it was a little hokey to come in dressed as the character, but I've cast people who have done that, so it must work.
Something that implies the character but is not actually what the character would wear. Because I think if it's exactly what the character would wear, then it's even a little distracting, and it may not be that that's the way the director sees that character.
I would steer away from making costumey choices. It distracts us from you because we're too busy paying attention to the desperate costume choices. If, however, you're auditioning for Blanche Dubois in a Tennessee Williams play and you show up in sneakers and a pair of sweatpants and a parka, that might be more difficult for you to project a certain sense of period femininity that's integral to that character. It doesn't mean you need to go out and buy a vintage outfit at all, but it does mean that you might want to show up in some heels that are not too high and some sort of blouse and dress that allow us to imaginatively project you into a period. No matter what you might choose to do strategically for your audition, it's probably all in your closet. If you're finding the need to go out and buy stuff, it means you're trying too hard.
Really, when people go all out and they come in with a costume on, it kind of freaks me out.
We are not looking for people to come in costume. We are not looking for people to dress for the piece. We are looking for people to come in and show that they're ready to work.
You really should dress like yourself. So yes, wear jeans, but don't wear torn jeans. Don't feel like you have to wear a black shirt. Wear the checkered shirt with the purple t-shirt underneath that you usually wear. Look like yourself and feel comfortable.
Hopefully the character is still forming in that person's mind, as opposed to already making a decision on what the character would look like or wear.
It somehow suggests that the people who are doing the adjudicating don't have any imagination. However, I think you can dress to suggest that you could be, in fact, play the role. The rule of thumb for me is never wear anything that would look out of place on the street, because it's a business transaction, so I think you should be dressed accordingly.
I'm always a little amused by women who dress up, who dress in high heels and fancy dresses. I never quite understand that.
I never really understood why people wear high heels.
No, it's funny because, the girls, the women, they come in with boots and shoes and a really nice dress and they look really good, and that's nice. The idea is to dress simply, to my way of thinking. Not to dress in a sort of a shabby way necessarily, but dress simply, dress comfortably, because the theater is imagination. But usually if people get too dressed up, you sort of think that they're trying to impress you. Because it's not about impressing anybody. It's not about selling yourself. That's the misnomer in some schools. They think there's a way to dress so that they will think you're viable and that you're authentic. That's not your authenticity. In fact, it's sort of, to my way of thinking, may fly in the face of what we're looking for, what I'm looking for.
You might be up for different roles, and so to be so geared for one particular role, it probably doesn't suit you.
Wear something that looks nice and that flatters you, and that you're comfortable in, most of all. Nothing's more painful to see than someone who's shown up for an audition and really dressed up, but not in something that A, flatters them or that they're comfortable in. It's too loose or it's too tight or it's way too formal or way too casual. It wants to be something that flatters you, that's comfortable, and that looks professional.
You suggest that you understand the milieu of the character that you're reading for, and that you can physicalize that with some naturalness that's in you in some way. And if the clothes that you pick for the audition help you do that, then that's good for you.
Auditioning is a nightmare. Walk into a room and you've got basically 15 seconds to make a good first impression, and then after that it's either all uphill or downhill. And so it's tough, and I know a lot of actors, after they've been around, don't even want to audition. They would rather just call me. But if you're new to the community and you're unknown, then you've got to go through the hard part of jumping through all those hoops. Submit your resume and walk in the room, and in a few seconds make a positive impression. Well, the one thing I don't want to see is somebody apologizing. I think that happens way too often, that you get really talented people and they come in and then they're not really as prepared as they should be. Somebody's inexperienced, like I say, in the first 15 seconds you walk in the room, and if you're not confident and you don't know exactly what you're going to be doing in the next few minutes, it shows up like a giant red flag, and the next 5 minutes are just painful for everybody because we're not interested. We will turn you off within seconds. To prep yourself, and as soon as the door opens, you're on. And it's how you look, it's how you present, it's how you carry this resume, or how you've presented your picture and photo. It's how you shake hands with somebody. Every little moment before you get to the monologue is being evaluated.
If for some reason you hold your resume like this when you walk in the room, it's a tiny thing, it could read subconsciously or consciously to the director that you're afraid, that you're hiding.
Even if you're really a beginner and you walk in and you're well prepared, if there's a small part, you're going to be cast.
That you take 25 minutes to set up your audition, that you have buckets full of props. Inexperience can also be when we say 16 bars and you sing the whole song. It's like, you know, it's just not thinking, it's just not respectful. Display just so much anxiety. I know it's really hard. I was an actor. It's really hard to audition, so I have great sympathy. But just try and put on a game face. It's a performance. Go in, give your best shot, get out of there and have a good day, and forget about it, because it's out of your control. If they start and say, can I start again? Absolutely. If you feel you're off on the wrong foot, stop. Just ask. I mean, I've never heard of, I mean, maybe, you know, some schmuck, but, you know, most people say, sure, go ahead. We want you to succeed. We want you to be brilliant. We're there to be dazzled. We're not there to be in judgment. It's the opposite. We're just there to love you. When someone comes in and you say, they'll tell you a piece, and you say, where's that from? Oh, I don't know. That's probably the end of the audition. Or the person who says, yeah, my friend wrote this yesterday. It's like, okay. With the entire history of dramatic literature and all of this, that we couldn't find this. Or I found it on the internet. You know, those are usually like stops. When we work on a piece, we want you to be one of those actors who researches, who thinks deeply, who does their homework, who comes in, you know, if there are holes in that backstory, you're filling them in. You know, you're doing research on all of this. And that if you're going to be in a play, you're going to know who wrote it, why they wrote it, when they wrote it, you know, the history, the politics, everything around it, about the period. You're going to make it a serious part of your life. I often ask, you know, who you're talking to in the piece and what's going on. And when I get an answer like, well, it's sort of like, I'm kind of thinking that, I was like, no. I don't think the playwright wrote that you're kind of thinking of, maybe sort of. I think there's something probably personal, immediate, and selfish that you're actually going after. And the more that you're playing a live action that can see its result in another human being and that matters, you can actually play something and have some fun. If you're not doing that, you know, the chance of you giving me a meandering, uninvested piece that doesn't make sense of the text is pretty high.
The auditioning actor should come in with confidence and know that this time has been set aside for him or her, and treat it like a very cordial business transaction.
They might lose their confidence quickly. They make excuses about what has happened. Rather, you know, if you go up, it happens to everybody. I don't know of an actor who hasn't forgotten their piece and gone in, or sang their music terribly, or not been able to hit a note. And it was bad, yeah. But maybe there was something in that audition that the director liked, or that the collaborators liked. But if you give the impression that you're making an excuse because of this happened, you know, well, I just didn't have enough time to prepare because, you know, I had to make sure that I couldn't catch my boss.
You may always be nervous, but your ability to camouflage that and still have a degree of relaxation when you come into the room right away lets us know that you are at ease, and therefore I'm able to be at ease and watch what you're going to show and share. I think a lot of people are so panicked over the fact that they're there, they immediately launch into their monologues, but without saying hello. You know, we're there. I want to be friendly. I want this. I know that this is a difficult process and can be uncomfortable. It's just the nature of the beast. Let's just take a minute to breathe and say hello and thank you for coming, and then you can tell me what it is you're going to do. A high school speech or debate formality of standing before the lectern or in the spotlight and saying, my name is Susie McGillicuddy, and today I'm going to do a cutting from blah, 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 and a blah, 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 and I'm already like, oh, that's already so formal and stilted, when in fact you can just be Susie McGillicuddy, and I've got a couple things to share. For my dramatic piece, I thought I'd do this, and my comedic piece, I'll do that. And then you're able to drop into a character, whereas before you are already playing a character, which is the nervous auditionee. It sounds like a simple thing, but it is one of the things that I'll admit makes me a little prejudicial. And it's not a huge prejudice, but there is that little bit of hump that then lets your assurance in how you deliver the monologue suppress that reaction in me, and then I'm with you. Some people, even very good people, come in and they already resent the process, and they resent you because of the perception that you're occupying a judgment seat, and they have to come before you to supplicate themselves for this part, which on one hand, oh gosh, it's awful, but it's true. But on the other hand, if they come in, and some people do, you can already sense right away there's a resentment that you're the enemy. It's hard then to get through that barrier of sharing 2 monologues and stories with someone who's delivering it with resentment. It's like a bad baker. You can taste their resentment in the cookie.
The walking out, the saying your name, the saying thank you at the end, and the transitions are far more important than the material.
Someone who leaves a phone machine message that's like rambling and like, well, I think I could come in at 12:30, but maybe 1 would be better. Although, like that, if you're not organized enough in your mind to leave a clear and simple phone message, that's telling.
Auditions are always terrifying, and I think they always will be. The ones that are the most successful are those who throw caution to the wind. They don't worry about what they look like. They don't worry about if they've gone too far, but they just go in and they have fun and they play.
Does it walk and does it talk like a human?
A person, like we all want. We want to work with somebody who's going to be nice and lively in a room and is going to help the process and not going to have an attitude. And that's what we want to see, who's going to be confident, who I don't have to take care of. You know, that's the kind of person that we want. That's not going to get their feelings hurt if somebody says something, or if you give them a direction and they're not going to pout. And, you know, there's just all kinds of things. You just want to see a really down-to-earth person, always. If they come into the space and they are, you know, extremely serious and not allowing themselves to let go, I'll watch their audition and then I'll say, okay, now totally do it another way. You're in an elevator and you've been in an elevator for an hour and there's no escape and nobody's coming and you can't get help. Now do the monologue, and it might be, you know, something that is absolutely out of context. But by seeing if they're able to make that adjustment, if they're able to play with those changes, then that tells me that that's an actor who's going to take direction really well.
The person is very relaxed, really warm. There's no problems when they come into the room. And then the audition that they give has this great entrance to a whole new world. So we know from the first 5 to 15 words they say what world they're in, what kind of character they are, what conflict is in front of them, and they can build that to a particular moment and have it resolve.
You don't want people who are going to give the performance they think you want. You don't want people who are second-guessing. You want people who come into the room ready to investigate this as a new play, as if it's never been done. I don't want people coming in to imagine to do something as if it's been done, because I'm not doing it. I'm looking at it as a new play. What makes this story animated? Why is this important? Why was it written? Why is it critical to tell today? Why should we do this? Those are the questions you ask. And so you want someone to come in and be part of that process. The number of people where you ask them to make an adjustment can't. You may not know what you're doing. You may not get it. Go, go, go. Leap in. Use the opportunity to stretch. Because if we can't get it in that room, I don't get to rehearse for 6 months. I don't get to rehearse for 6 weeks. I have a very short rehearsal period. I need to know that when we say let's try it another way, because you don't start knowing how it's going to be. You start with your ideas, and you have images, but I find so much in the room, and I find so much with the actors. So I'm hugely actor dependent. I need wonderful actors who are going to work with me to make something alive and vital happen. So I'm looking for co-conspirators. I'm looking for partners. I'm looking for people who are going to jump in, try stuff, fall flat on their face, but okay, what's next? Often I'll ask people about the pieces they've done and why. And I love when people have thought about it. I love intelligent actors. I love actors who've really thought and wrestle with it and play with it and have been thinking about it and have opinions about it. And I may not agree with that opinion, but I like that they've had an opinion.
I really look for somebody who's willing to take risks and not to be so outrageous that you kind of scare the people behind the table away, but somebody who's willing to try to be bold, to be brave, to be passionate about what they have to say, and and to handle themselves in a really professional manner when they're in front of you. That will get my attention.
The actor's craft is, first of all, comprised of a good ear for how people talk, how we communicate, how we respond. Secondly, can you repeat it? That's the big problem, because we are the instrument. The violinist has it out here, gets to hear it happen there. We have to make it from here and hear it happen and then repeat it. Recognize the moments of brilliance in rehearsal, record them, and repeat them. I have my ear tuned for an acute observation of vernacular and idiomatic expression. That tells me that this actor has removed him or herself from the classroom and has entered life's classroom, where we are all students.
If it's a contemporary piece, you're looking for natural rhythms, and ideally the ones the writers encoded into their language. I don't expect people who are coming to audition for a show that might be English or Irish or what have you to have a full command of dialect just for an audition, but to have a certain sense of that is kind of imperative. The choices that one makes in terms of how the language is delivered and how they are physically in the space, how far or reserved they are emotionally, are all things that I'm attuned to after the first 10 people come through the audition room. There's a certain bar that's set, and now everybody who comes through or who has come through, the ones who are going to go further are the ones who are making more creative yet believable but invested choices in the material. The number of the places I work at, some are very intimate, like the theater that's behind us right now. You could hiccup and the back row could hear you clearly. Some venues, especially the ones I work at out of town, have 1,000 seats or more, and they're outdoors. You have a whole meteorological phenomenon of open air and the things that fly in it. So I tend to move the audition to a bigger room simply because it allows you to, forgive me, make a discard pile of everyone that you cannot hear. Because they could be fantastic as close as we're sitting together, but if their voice can't carry that space, they're of no use to the production. And then the final thing is when I come from around the table. You know, after you've made your first pass and I come forward to have a chat with you, what I'm really looking at is, are they drawing away from someone who wants to talk about what they've done? Because some people have worked on their monologue in isolation under a bell jar. It will never change. It may be the only way they can do that part and the only way they want to do that part. That's what I'm ascertaining when I come from around the table to have a discussion, even if briefly, to applaud some choices that I found exciting and to suggest that they either try it again. Sometimes I do that because I've sensed that the person was nervous, even if their resume suggests that they've got a lot of experience. Some people are never going to like auditioning. Who does? So I like to give people the generosity of, you know, that's great, that was great. Could you do a second pass? Everything you did I thought was really interesting. I would just like you to, now that we're in the room together, settle in. Sometimes people, I can tell, are maybe playing it safe. I want to reassure them that I'm interested in what they might be finding if they pushed that experience or the delivery of that character to a more heightened place that would read in a larger theater, but they're not going to be judged if there are cracks in the veneer at this point. Because again, I'm not interested in a perfectly delivered monologue. I'm interested in the potential that lies behind that. Sometimes I've cast people who did a shitty monologue, but everything that was wrapped around that shitty monologue and the conversation that we had about the play and the character and what was representative in their resume for roles that were taken to completion and delivered, and even a response I've gotten from directors that they've worked with in those roles. Yeah, he or she auditions very weakly, but trust me, they've got the goods.
You really need to say, I'm going to go there and I'm going to see, not just on stage, see myself reflected on stage, but in the box office, by the ticket takers, in the administrative offices, on the board. What is this organization about? And am I really a part of that universe?
Everybody likes to say they do ensemble work. That isn't the case. Believe me, that isn't the case. Ensemble work happens or begins with dressing room assignments, pay scales, all those sorts of things. So there's got to be a willingness in an actor for me to work with them that says, I'm willing to enter into the process and play whatever role that is needed to make that project a success. I would rather have an actor who has a large band of ability that I can pick and choose from, but who is someone that I can stand being around for 5-6 weeks. These are plays, for heaven's sakes, and so we should have a degree of fun, or at least some sort of good feeling about them. We shouldn't think, oh my God, I've got to go to that play again and see that person. You know, so you want someone who's genial, someone you can get along with. They also have to be willing to accept my view of history. I'm not going to end up fighting with someone about what I think happened and the way I interpret America's narrative. If I have to fight them about those issues, as well as helping them move toward the character and the trajectory of the play, then that's too much to ask.
An actor who is present in their body, who uses their body to express the depth of what's going on inside. There's also just an intangible quality that's helpful. In addition, someone who is generous. There's sort of a kind of reaching out that people can do with their acting, and that's hugely helpful to 10,000 Things, because we have to reach out to audiences who really actually don't want to see theater at all. Like, I would say 90% of the time, I just don't understand what people are saying. Huge reason for that is that the action isn't clear. It's often also, as part of that, not clear who they're talking to, because if your action is trying to do something to someone, if you're not clear about who you're talking to, that also muddies the action. So it's really all of that in 1 minute monologue. The other huge thing that is so often missing is that the stakes aren't high enough. The actor has not deeply imagined what's at stake. That sort of makes everything flat, and just don't make middle of the road choices. Go all out, for sure.
Working with an actor after they've done their monologue. And I had several experiences where actors have come in and done one thing, and I thought, oh, this is not so great. But then in trying something else, I said, wow, there's some real talent here in another context that I would, if I had just said goodbye at that point, would not have been able to find.
It's so hard for us and at different points in our lives, and I think especially for young people, but at any age, truly. I certainly have my vanities, I know I do, is to drop that, and to feel free and to feel like, yes, I can just stand on stage and have no, and try not to have my ego get in my way, or try not to, feel like I have to be beautiful, whether it's a man or a woman, in this role, when beauty is not necessarily a part of it. I want that person to move me.
I actually enjoy auditions. They really are a process of exploration. You oftentimes have no idea what's going to happen. Of course, the actors are going to come in, introduce themselves, do the monologues or whatever, but you don't know oftentimes the level of work that the actors are going to, you don't know what kind of take or interpretation an actor is going to give to a given monologue. So there's all these things that are unknowns that make it interesting. And I never cease to be interested by some of the things you can learn. But you have to bring that kind of intensity. You have to bring that kind of your own individual belief as an actor, as a performer, in what you're doing with this character, with this monologue, with the song. and somehow you have to overcome the intimidation of standing up there alone.
Looking at the institution that you're auditioning for is really important. For the Guthrie, it means 2 classical pieces that are, maybe one is funny, one is serious. It's very much a traditional, looking at the text kind of theater company.
Generally speaking, what we like to see here is we like to see a classical piece in verse and a more contemporary piece. One of them should be comic in tone and the other should be more serious in tone. That gives us a sense of the actor's range in terms of language skills and stylistic, as well as if they have any comic ability.
Contrasting could mean stylistically, how you deliver a particular text. Maybe when you go really far and become very animated, and then when you find a more subtle quality. They could both be classical pieces.
Contrasting actually means contrasting. It means they are actually different. I love when the actor that I saw in the first piece is unrecognizable. When that range is just shocking, that you can't believe they're so funny or bawdy or wild or physical or violent or brutal, and so tender and tiny and elegant, and it's just like, it's so great. They handle classic language, whether it's Molière or Shakespeare, and they're just, or the Greeks, and they're just invested and smart about that language and having that epic power, and then something tiny and funky and contemporary, and really push it. The more contrasting it is, the better. The more fun it is for us, because then you're like, oh my God, what an epic power they have inside them. What a big person they have. What else is in there? Then you think, oh my God, anything we want to play with is in there. Same with songs, no, those 2 songs are actually the same song. They actually put your voice in exactly the same place, tell the same kind of emotional story. Look at this song or this song or this song or this song, like really push it, really, really push it.
It's also what show are you auditioning for? I mean, if you are auditioning for a realistic play, you don't want to come in with a classical monologue. I don't think it helps you. It doesn't serve you. You want to come in with maybe a comedic piece, and then you also want to come in with a more dramatic piece.
One wonders why. A classical and a contemporary monologue. Let's say we're doing a contemporary play. Why not 2 contemporary monologues? There's little difference between the classical repertoire and the contemporary repertoire as far as how acting goes. Shakespeare's world, the characters in that world he created, talk the way he wrote them. He's not writing Shakespeare. He's not writing poetry. He's writing utterances. Just as Harold Pinter is writing utterances. It is poetry because it's compiled by a poet. But it belongs to the actor. Acting Shakespeare is the same as acting contemporary language. Shakespeare also has its vernacular nuance. The British, when they do Shakespeare, they bring to it contemporary vernacular melody and nuance, because it's really the music of language that tells us the meaning. The words are significant, but more significant is how it's done, how we talk. How do those words, what meaning do they have for me as a person?
If they're auditioning only for a modern play, a contemporary play, I don't really need to see Shakespeare as one of their contrasts, and I want to see 2 contrasting modern pieces. And by contrast there, I'd probably say, generally I'd say one would be comedic and the other not. They each have to have a quick character and a quick image, but the characters should be different from each other. So it's in mood, in genre, perhaps in language.
I think you should have like 4 to 6 of them that you can just, piece together depending on what they're looking for, and make that decision when you go.
You learn a lot about the actor by finding out what to her or to him is contrasting.
I'll be very clear with people that I want 2 contrasting contemporary pieces because I am an idiot on the classics, and so when I'm watching people do Shakespeare, I'm just checking out because they could be great and I wouldn't know it, or they could be terrible and I still wouldn't know it.
People are like, they're like a labyrinth, and you never know when you come around some corner where you're going to come into just some horrible dead end. And so the more you can see about that person, what they're comfortable doing, what they're not comfortable doing, the limits they're willing to go, to be silly, to laugh at themselves, to find anger, to find pain inside themselves. The more you can find out in an audition, the more safely you'll feel about hiring them. You know, because you don't know where that role is going to go, really. You want possibility.
You have to enjoy them. Pick something you like. Pick something you enjoy doing. And pick something you understand.
You have to know the theater company that you're auditioning for and the kind of work they do, and that should influence all of your choices.
It's a grueling process, and I really feel for all of the performers who come in to do that, but it's a necessary process as well. You get to see it. It's a way to open up other people that you may not see in production anyplace else, and you get to actually engage and watch some of their work in a minimal fashion. But it's an exciting and an interesting process, but also a grueling process. So everybody feels like they're being judged, and of course they are.
You can't hide with Shakespeare. You can't. It really shows. It shows you, right? Which is the beauty of the text. But it also can be a hindrance if you don't want to be seen.
They give you this kind of what they think is this classically sounding Shakespearean approach to something. I'm usually turned off by that.
The hardest part, and the thing I look for first in an actor, is they cut through the facade, they cut through this, they don't play style, they give me some sense of a person, a personality, and a character through the style, or on the other side of the style, however they use it. If they stay in a style, I can't really take it any further, and they're probably not going to be seriously considered.
To totally drop any affectation. To do it as if you were telling me what you did this morning when you woke up and walking me through your day. So that it was without the mask of the Shakespearean actor.
It's really hard when people put on their Shakespeare voice. You know, you're not English. It's a human being in a real situation of extraordinary stakes with fantastic language that can capture it, deliver that.
The production of what I call noble noise. It's declamation of words that happen in a certain meter with a generalized air of officiousness or nobility or significance, but are hollow and not particular or specific or invested, and lack an understanding of what's actually being said in the thought.
Or the Shakespeare style, how to do hanky acting. You know, I hate it, hanky acting. They do that downtown a lot in the Shakespeare. Think of a hanky, with a hanky, pull a hanky out. Wave a hanky around to show that you're alive. I'm alive over here, of a hanky. There is no way to speak Shakespeare. We speak Shakespeare the way we talk today. We have different words, but the melody of our idiomatic and vernacular sensibility has to be applied to Shakespeare, as it is applied to a contemporary playwright. So if you do both of these, and I can hear the dance of our language in both the classical and the contemporary, I like you. If you do the contemporary really well, seems well, and you can't do the classical, let's say Ibsen, I go, there's something wrong here. What you don't appreciate is that people of all ages were almost the same. One of the little tests for an actor is, do you understand that people in period plays are real people? They do everything we do. Everything. And they'll probably do it better. We tend to give them short shrift. So at least when I see a contemporary and a classical piece, I get to know if the perspective of the actor has a broad embrace or a narrow one. I'm always interested to see how people can handle Shakespeare. And it's such an incredible revelation when you find someone who can talk Shakespeare, who does it in such a way that the character and the language is just living. It's uttered. It's not acted in any Shakespearean way.
Starting your monologue with an idea, with a presence, so that you have kind of a launch in a way. And then, of course, finding that great sincerity of the character, taking us on a little ride of the conflict and the resolution, or maybe it doesn't get resolved, but it's a continuation of that problem, and we're with that character.
Make sure you know what the hell you're talking about. Make sure you know who you're talking to. Make sure you really, really, really understand the stakes, and deliver those stakes. This man is not often dealing with domestic trifles. If there's a domestic trifle, someone's going to die, or it's a life or death situation. So you want to make sure that you've done your work. You're not just delivering the language, but you're delivering the situation. You're delivering the given circumstances. You're delivering that character. You're delivering the raison d'etre for the reason that piece was born. The good actors, just have invested. They've really studied it. They've really done their research. They really know what the scene's about. Others who haven't done that sort of put a patina on it, either a performative patina where they're busy and they're rolling on the ground and very, very physical and yet not clear, or layer some kind of veneer on it that gets in the way of the sort of emotional connection.
It does need to be delivered in a particular way. It doesn't work to take Shakespeare's language and mammetize it. So I'm going to take this 500-year-old verse and speak it in a way that is so contemporary, it will somehow become profound for me in my modern age. And there is a middle ground whereby we're able to take that language and operate within its engineered parameters of meter and rhythm, yet nonetheless help it maintain a currency and a freshness that makes it not a historical period recording, but something that's lived as acutely today as it was back then. For all sorts of understandable reasons, we tend to defer the ownership of that historical literature to the UK and Europe. There's a way that is owned on the American tongue that does not necessitate the relentless use of British dialect, but nonetheless does adhere to the rules for how it needs to be delivered. And like anything that's got a structure to it, the more you know the rules, the more you're able to bend and torque them and find other interesting effects that are not the obliteration of its inherent beauty.
There's a tendency for contemporary American actors to distrust language. I think it comes out of our culture, that we, as a culture, we distrust language. But in fact, classical texts are all about the power of words. And so what we look for are actors who enjoy words and are able to use the words as tools to further their portrayal.
You have to have a really heightened sense of poetic form. And it has to be poetic form. It can't just be form, because form itself is stiff and ugly. But poetic form is something different. Poetic form in your movement, poetic form in your voice, poetic form in understanding the gorgeous language, and keep it as poetry and not as stiff form. Aside from that, you need to have really powerful emotion when it's called for, and a deep and powerful sense of reality. It's almost like opera. The gorgeous meaning is in the form, but you still have to bring yourself to all that form and all of your energy.
Greek tragedy, I think you need to go to the emotional place that it demands in a moment without feeling self-conscious. The comedy has to still be funny, even though you don't have the funny lines necessarily that are always, the ones that you laugh at. You have to find the rhythm and the timing of it to make it funny. That maybe you take a pause at the right time and you change the rhythm of how you speak.
Because oftentimes what I'll see in classical things is that the meaning is pushed so hard that the language doesn't get a chance to really work. and I mean, some of that Shakespeare language, of course, is fantastic and incredible. But how do you make that your own? How do you make that your situation as opposed to the universal situation? And so how do you step back and make personal meaning as opposed to, societal meaning?
The stakes have to be really high. The action has to be really clear. If those things are clear, then the language is clear. That old adage of how you can often tell in 10 seconds, it is so often true. And I, of course, stay open through the whole monologue, but if you come out and just kind of adjust your body so you're standing straight and your hands are like at your sides and your feet are planted, it's just like, it's so disappointing right then, because that means to me your body's going to be shut off and you're going to be trying to do it right instead of doing it. The language in Shakespeare, I think so often people take it for granted, and they seem to take a kind of pride in rattling it off really quickly. The words that a character chooses to express what's going on, I want to understand how they're forged in your belly and why you need that particular word, and why everything in your experience as a character has brought you to the point where you need to say this word at this moment to express the enormity of what's going on inside you. There's just nothing casual about that. And it's such a gift to be given these incredible words to express yourself, but it's not even that you're given them, but as a character you are inventing them at the moment. So to understand the language on that level so that it comes out as being spontaneous and necessary in the moment, that's awesome.
I don't know of a director who hasn't been, I wouldn't say fooled, but who hasn't misinterpreted the ability of an actor based upon a good audition. And then what you find out is they keep doing that audition over and over and over, and you've seen all there is to see. So it's important for me to ask them to do some things differently, perhaps ask them to be silly, or whatever it might be, to see if they're willing to trust, take direction, and push more to the edges of the things that they've shown me.
In the audition notice, we say, don't do songs from the show. It tells the auditioners that they already have a take on it. They've already made some decisions about it. And it just doesn't do that actor any good. That's all. It's not about me not wanting to hear them or the music director not wanting to hear them. It has nothing to do with us. It's just really building a landscape for that actor to be their very best.
I actually prefer to hear someone sing a song from the actual musical. Just like sometimes I like to hear them do a monologue from the exact same play, to just see what kinds of choices they make. And then you can work with them on the song and see how much they're willing. Are they going to just stay with that song and their concept of that song and that character, or can you work with them, and how flexible is that person?
We want to see your range. We also want to see a choice you make, because I want to see, can you tell a story? Can you inhabit a character? Because often what you're looking for, okay, they can sing it, but can they act it? Because if it's a musical, you'll be acting that song. Do they know how to invest in a song? Do they know how to tell a story through a song? Which is so hard. That's why there are very few musical stars, theater stars, because it's really hard to both nail that song just on the technical terms and also inhabit it and deliver the text.
I don't think choosing something from that show is a good idea, because again, what you're doing is you're running into the director's interpretation of that. So if you come in and sing the song, and I'm going, I see that in a very different way. So you're doing what you think is a great job, but the director has a completely different idea, so then you just shot yourself in the foot. Bummer.
Generally speaking, when we're doing a musical for the first audition, I would prefer to hear something from a different show, but in the same style or in the same category. I don't necessarily want to hear something from the show at the first audition, because I'd hear it over and over and over and over again. Eventually, when it comes back down to a callback situation, all of the finalists would be given the same piece of music to learn.
The one thing I will say about musicals, don't bring in something the accompanist can't play. So keep it simple, make it easy for the accompanist. Come in and sing whatever suits you the best and shows you off. And those are the people I end up hiring often.
I just want to hear their voice and range. So I want them to do what they think makes them sound best.
You want something similar and related to the kind of work you're doing, but you don't want the work itself.
We're not looking for a particular thing that they can do, but a vocal quality that he feels that he could work with, or she feels that she could work with. So it's not even so much as a trained voice or a musical theater voice as one that would be interesting within the mix of the cast.
Most auditions are just unlikable by the people who set them up and then the people who go to them. Nobody likes them. They're filled with fear, anxiety. Many times people are brilliant at auditioning, and then when they're in the show, there is a loss, something doesn't translate, and the opposite is true. So people can be terrible at auditioning, and if they get, even though they've done a terrible audition, if they're lucky to get cast, they can be brilliant.
I look at special skills a lot. I look at that before I look at where the education occurred, because I'm always wondering who can play the violin badly or really well, who's got percussion experience, who can do a triple backflip, especially for actors who are starting out and might be cast in an ensemble situation. That's the sort of thing that, for me personally as a director, brings people to the top of the list, because you're likely going to have half a dozen people who can deliver the language well, but who can play a servant and stand on their head or ride a unicycle.
I always have a ball with it when they talk about I can raise one eyebrow, or I'm good at horseback riding, or all those sorts of things. It's really instructive about the way the actor feels about themselves and their craft, as well as sometimes, however silly it might be, it's exactly what you're looking for. And so I encourage people to list those special skills, have fun with it, but you can't get around the play, the role you played, the director, and the theater.
I like them edited. I don't care if somebody has like a van driver's license or a truck driver's license and stuff like that. If I want to know if somebody plays the violin or the accordion or sings, if it's not a musical audition.
You're always looking, somebody might have a certain skill with a guitar or some instrument or martial arts or dance or whatever. Those things are of interest to me. Anybody, even if they're coming in for a regular play, if I see that they have a singing background or something like a vocal background, that's of interest to me.
If you write it down, you better be prepared for somebody to call you on it right now. If you say, I can recite the Bible in the duration of one belch, you better be ready for somebody to do that. People will put down things that they really can't do. They can say, I ride a horse, or they'll say, I speak Bulgarian. You go, okay, can you give me a couple lines in Bulgarian, and they know 3 words. So we call that the I can ride a horse syndrome, where people claim to do things that they might not be proficient in. What instruments might they play? What languages might they speak? What physical skills do they have that makes them unique?
An awful lot about auditioning is about trying to create a relationship. It's not just about getting an actor in a role or getting that particular, or working for that particular theater in that particular job. The audition process really starts a long time before you get to the hall. Their first contact is important, and the people that they talk to take notes, that the people at the front of the desk are paying attention to how they're behaving and their demeanor and their professionalism, and how the actor and the theater close down an audition process, or if there's a follow-up, is part of that too, because your audition for any one role might actually pay off 2 years later when something else comes up and they remember that actor and they remember how that went and the impression that they made or the way they handled themselves. It's a longer term investment, though it may not seem like it at the time.
I will hear and see anything, and if I'm surprised and it's done well and I connect to it, my chips are all in.
The quality of mercy, Hamlet's to be or not to be. Something from Our Town, the really, really commonly done plays. You just can't get a fresh take on their acting because the piece is so overdone.
I just want it to be something that I have not heard 10,000 times before. And I can tell you exactly what I mean. It's that Mabel monologue from An Ideal Husband and the Tuna Fish monologue by Christopher Durang. I can tell you, it's true they set me on edge. I can't stand them because I cannot tell you the number of times I've been in a general call, and I kid you not, 20 people come through with those two monologues. Out of the entirety of dramatic literature, those are the two that 20 out of 40 people are going to pick. I can't believe it. You really will have to edit this out because it just sets me on edge. Here's the one thing, you know, there's a reason people pick those monologues. They're very well written. They meet the requirements of something that's, you know, comedic in either contemporary or, you know, more heightened language. But they are so pervasive. You've got the accumulated history of everybody who's come before you in this audition and all the other auditions before you, unless you can deliver those in a way that is so startling and so fresh and so invested and so vivacious, you really can't be Googling the top 10 female or male monologues because those are the choices that come up. You've got to find something that is more particular, more true to you, perhaps more unusual without being extreme. Those are the choices that also make you sit forward when you're sitting in a casting chair, because it demonstrates that here's an actor who's an artist who has found that monologue out of Richard II that nobody ever does, and it's so stunningly awesome.
I always love to be surprised. You know, I always love when people have made a choice that is wildly original or a piece of material that I've never heard, that makes sense for them to do, that they can handle. You know, it just means they're curious and, you know, they're not, and they're researching and they're thinking about the literature, whether it's a, you know, a monologue from something that's smart and strong, or if they do something I've heard 17,000 times, it's not like I want to, you know, put a bullet through my head. It's more like, good luck. We want people to choose really well-written work, smart songs, smart monologues that have something in them. You know, if people don't need to come here and do anything from children's literature or anything from a children's show, we don't approach our work that way. We approach our work that we're making serious theater, you know, for young people and adults. Don't pander to us. Don't do a nursery rhyme. Do a piece that shows you as a serious actor that knows what they're doing, or a comic actor that's bold. We don't care if it has language in it. We don't care if it's inappropriate. We don't care about any of that. We want you to come in and show your stuff.
Seems like singers get the same audition songbook, and they will all find this one monologue from Neil Simon's play, and they will do it.
For me, it's how you do it, you know, the choices that you make within it, because it can feel like it's something totally different if, you know, if you find a particular take on it, or you just do it better than anyone else, or you have an interesting, you know, idea behind it. But for instance, if a woman took did a male role, did a male speech, I love to see that. I know some students look around and they try to find the most obscure pieces, but they may not be that interesting. I mean, the ones that are there get used a lot, get used for a reason. I mean, because there's so much you can do with them, and the more obscure pieces are obscure because they really aren't that interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, some of these pieces, you hear them again and again and again, and they're just terrible. Then all of a sudden one day someone walks through the door and they do it and they show you it's genius. So I don't mind. I hear, it doesn't matter if it's been done again and again and again. There are those that you hear these over and over, but what you hear are bad renditions of them. So it's not so much about the piece. In fact, That's not the problem. The piece isn't the problem. It's the life that has been given to it. That's the problem. So it doesn't matter to me. They could do the phone book or say the alphabet. I know there was one year when the vagina monologues was going, I heard more about the vagina than I don't have to hear anymore. I know all about the vagina. And then men also, they have all their ones about, all these sex monologues. It's like they do them because they think they're being scandalous and bold. You know, I'm beyond being scandalized. You know, I don't care. It's all fine with me. I really don't care. But then that always makes me, they think they're showing me that they're iconoclastic and that they're bold and dangerous. And I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for truth and utterance. I'm looking for truthful behavior. That's all. It's very simple. I'm not looking at how loud you can talk. I'm not looking how dramatic you can be. Nothing like that. Drama is easy. The hard part is the first act of the play where nothing's happening. You know, you have to drink coffee. Can you drink coffee on stage? The problem with some of the famous stuff, trying to get to the essence of them, they're all corroded, like a little old ship down in the bottom of the ocean. You have to get all that scraped off the language because it lives around it in the mystical sense, and that all has to be cleaned away. Then you get to the pure language, and then the utterance it wishes to speak. But it doesn't, it's so often spoken from a perspective of that which encrusts it.
A lot of actors, especially those who start out, think that they might find it more difficult to inhabit many monologues. And the way around that is to maybe somehow write something that's emotionally extreme, but in their own language. And the unfortunate reality is we can tell that immediately. And it's like sitting across from someone who's having a meltdown in a coffee shop, as opposed to someone who's actually got words that were scripted by a writer who knows what they're doing, and that's leading somewhere and telling us something about life and the human condition that's not emotional discharge. So I have compassion for those folks. I give them some encouragement. I ask them who wrote that monologue, and sometimes they'll glass over because they've forgotten to remember what the play was that they made up. Be intelligent and curious about the range of theatrical literature that is present out there in the culture. Like any job interview, half of what constitutes success is knowing how to present yourself in a way that makes you stand out and that represents your greatest strengths. And all of that is undercut if you're doing a monologue that is so threadbare and time-worn and overused. I would advocate for anyone to abandon a monologue if they have come across it because they took a shortcut by trying to find what's most popular, or if they discover that somehow something that they've enjoyed doing for 2 or 3 years is now one that 5 or 6 other people in your market have as one of their back pocket monologues. Move on. Sometimes people mistake a monologue that they know well and feel they've conquered and have down pat, becomes stale. The truth of the matter is, and it's a cruel truth, is any actor can deliver 2 good monologues. And in a market where you might be meeting the same directors and casting people multiple times over the course of multiple years, you need to be recycling your material. Because nothing's more demoralizing than to come across again someone that you're curious about, but they're doing the same 2 monologues they did for you last year. Because we do remember them. We do remember them. We make our notes and we go, oh, and then you're like, oh, now you're doing those 2 again.
I would say Amazing Grace is sort of, and when somebody says, can you sing something for me? And I would say, leave that one off your list. Just because it's always, it just blows me away that is always what people come up with. Not Happy Birthday or Take Me Out the Ball Game or the National Anthem, Amazing Grace.
To me, if 20 people sing the same song, it's 20 different songs because each person will do it differently. And so just seeing that process, seeing who does it in which way, can be informative. There's always lots of information to be gleaned, even from the same song or the same monologue.
I don't necessarily agree with, oh my God, if I hear that particular monologue one more time, I'm going to pull my nails out. Because maybe the person who's going to do that particular monologue on that particular day will be brilliant, and I'd like to see that.
It's incredibly hard and difficult, and my actors who do it have my complete sympathy, and I wish there were an easier way. I haven't been able to think of a good way because there's so many people to see in a short amount of time. But I just want every actor to know that I'm rooting for them and they have my complete sympathy in having to do it, and my understanding of how hard it really is. I admire actors for doing it.
I mean, I had somebody come in, and want to bring cookies. Crazy things like that happen. It's like, please don't bring me cookies or dinner. Or, thanks. I've been here a long time, but really, don't do that.
I hate auditions when actors either want to seduce me or shock me. It's like, out of here, no more. Thank you for your time.
I can tell you the most peculiar one, the most disturbing one, which was, I think, delivered by someone who was off their medication, and they came in a dirty parka and I can't even tell you what the piece was from, but it was read from a piece of dirty paper, not memorized, but it was accompanied by the ritualistic display of a bunch of moldy grapes and a bundle of sticks tied with twine and a crushed tin can.
We did have an actress that came in, and all I remember is that she was screaming and rolling on the floor an awful lot. And that's still in my mind. It's like, I don't know what that had to do with anything that we were auditioning for. It was totally shocking.
One of the ones that stands out in my mind is a woman came with a sock puppet, and she kind of was holding a magazine, so the sock puppet, I don't know if the sock puppet was supposed to be peeking out over the magazine, if it was reading the magazine, and started doing something from Immanuel Kant, this puppet. And I can't remember if she was reading Immanuel Kant or if she'd memorized or something, but I just remember a sock puppet and Immanuel Kant, and wow, it was truly unique and unusual, and certainly made a lasting impression.
The worst audition I ever saw was someone who decided to go on and on and on and on and on, and nothing seemed to stop him. It was sort of a psychotic thing. That was the worst.
I go in there as an equal. I feel just as nervous for the person up there as I am behind the table. I want everybody to succeed, but I really enjoy it. It's how we find who we find to work with, to do what we want to do. That theaters are only as good as the freelance artists that come and make the art that they're doing. To me, a good auditioner makes me feel lucky to be in their presence. It's not like they're looking for a handout. Wow, I'm an actor and you have jobs and I'd like a job. Rather, you are fortunate to be in my presence, and for the next 2 minutes I own the stage and you get to be here.
It was so moving that the stage manager and I just started crying. And I don't cry at auditions, but that person went beyond an idea of an audition to actually that whole thing of what is theater all about. It's about transcendence and moving people. So it was really, really quite extraordinary, and I'll never forget it.
His craft was consummate. I mean, he had control of everything, yet there was a discovery about it, a danger. He even went up for a line and laughed and went back to it and immediately turned it into something. I mean, it was an absolutely thrilling audition.
Well, it was me, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
She sang the Sondheim tune, and she just stood there and sang it without doing a whole lot. And I stopped her after a few seconds because I thought, wow, she's really talented and she's got a great voice. So I asked her, there was a chair on stage, and I said, use the chair in 3 or 4 different ways, and you've got like 18 bars to play with this number. So go for it. And she took that chair and turned it into a sofa, a car, a bed. She used it as this incredible prop, and the whole song came to life in this incredible, playful way. And I was really just looking to see how inventive somebody could be.
Chris Bays is the head of physical training, I think is his title, at Yale University. He's an amazing actor. When he came to town, Minneapolis, as a young man, he auditioned for us. And this is my romantic memory now from here on out, so it might not be exactly right. But he auditioned for everyone. He didn't live here, and he came to town to audition. He auditioned for everyone. Nobody took him. He came out on stage and started to do his audition, and we said, we got to take this guy. Immediately, we got to take this guy. Because he had something that spoke to us, right? But obviously, at the time, spoke to no one else. He went on after that. He worked with us for about 5 years, I think, and then he went on, acted at the Guthrie in some major parts, and then made his way out east and wound up where he is today. But, it's a very subjective thing. I really believe that. Everything is involved, right? Timing, engagement, commitment. He got up, and I don't know what the speech was, but he dropped his pants. His pants just went down. It was on purpose, right? But it was so surprising, and at the same time engaging because he was so committed. It was really quite beautiful. We hired him. Now if I have auditions, everyone's going to walk in and want to drop their pants.
I find the audition process generally to be a cruel and inhumane process. It's one of the reasons I'm not an actor. But when I was an actor and did audition, I was very aware of what I didn't like about it or what I found intimidating about it. So it's actually always in the forefront of my mind when I'm conducting an audition. How would I like to conduct this in a way that A, is going to drive results for the show, but also have the utmost respect for the people who are coming in and giving of their time and talent and being, generous and vulnerable for you as a director or a producer. I get only 50% of what I need from an audition by looking at somebody's monologue or their resume. The other 50%, sometimes it's 60-40, comes from what I get a sense of as a personal rapport, what I can detect of an artistic intelligence on the part of the one who's auditioning that I think is going to be something that might surprise or dovetail with my sense of the character or the show. Oftentimes I think actors need permission in an audition situation to push too far. Very often I think actors are expected to hedge their bets, to try to anticipate what the aesthetic of the director or the producer is, and maybe not be as creatively risky in the delivery of the material than they're capable of. Those are the actors I'm interested in.
Schedule.
Availability. Scheduling.
Scheduling, because sometimes an actor say, oh, I can do the show, but I just can't come to the last week of rehearsals. Oh, great.
Do I want to work with this person? Is this person mature enough? Is this person come to rehearsal on time? Not just between that person and me, but part of auditions too is watching that person work with the other people around them.
There's an actress in, I'll be going into Alice soon. There's an actress that I cast in that show, and I created an improv based on an article I read that morning in the New Yorker. And it was about a clown exercise that Chris Bays, a wonderful director and teacher, did at Yale. And so I just said, oh, I have to love that. I think I'll try that today. It was fresh and it was complicated. It's very hard, very, very hard exercise to do. Most people did it and they either failed completely or they did a little bit that worked. And this one young woman went in and just kept going, this exercise. And people were looking at me like, you're going to stop her? And I said, this is unbelievable. She's on it. She's found something that was insanely funny, completely committed, endlessly inventive, and like any good moment of clown, like when Bill Irwin or somebody finds something, they can go forever. You know, like Godot, I'm just going to tie my shoe. I can give you, if I'm in my clown, I can do 2 hours of tying my shoe, and you're going to die. You know, if I haven't found a character, she found a character, and I was like, this is just, I mean, she's just a student actor, and stunning, you know. And so I was like, I cast her. I was like, that improv literally went on 10 minutes. I just sat and watched. I was like, how far can she go? Everyone was like, you know, we've got 20 people here, let's keep going. I said, this is kind of a miracle. Let's just, and eventually I stopped, but I stopped her. She didn't stop. I was like, Jesus, this is fantastic. Perhaps there's that funny mix of freedom and discipline, you know, that you know that they're going to be disciplined in the room, and they can, you know, they can focus and deliver and do something precise. At the same time, a possibility of surprise. If somebody surprises you, or takes it in a place that you didn't know, or goes to an emotional place that's just a little raw, or a little real, or a little more surprising, or makes a comedic choice that's just like so out there. You know, it's like, wow, where'd that come from? It's like, okay, this is going to be wild.
Again, sometimes it's just a sense of, well, they don't have the chops. They're not going to make it in this production. They're simply going to be the wrong age. I do want to cast a woman. I don't want to cast a man. Maybe there's just a sense of personal style that actor is a wonderful talent, but they're not going to be a fit for the milieu or the aura or the texture that you're looking for in the production that you have in your head. So maybe I want someone that's going to be more rigorous in their preparation and they use their intelligence in a different way. Or maybe it's the flip. Maybe this actor is so sharp and so smart, but I really want someone that's going to be more intuitive here. Sometimes they're just being set aside because they're not going to be a fit for the direction that you feel like you're going.
Actors come in and think, I can do that role, I can do it. It's not always whether you can do that role. It's a bigger puzzle. And you may have certain pieces in place, and you're going, I have this and this and this. So how's that other person going to fit in? And the actors aren't always aware of that. So there's a whole thing there. I could have done that role. Wendy Knox didn't cast me. I hate her.
It's very common for directors to work with the same actors over and over again. And I think that makes sense to me because they know what they're getting. It's very hard for a director to hire someone new unless they are perfect for the role. If you have a familiarity with an artist and you have a trust built in already, it only makes sense that you would gravitate towards somebody who is a known commodity. But I actually love mixing things up. I mean, I love having a foundation of people who I'm comfortable with, and I also love the excitement expanding the talent pool and bringing in somebody to a company who is not known. You look for a past history. Has that actor worked at other theaters that are comparable, or has he or she trained with people who you trust?
Playfulness, their spirit of play, their willingness to take direction, their ability to change in a moment, because you may not, in your audition process, you may not have that role figured out yet.
If they're all appropriate, there's no deciding factor. You just roll the dice.
Nuances of language. You know, if a role is a dramatic role, but the rhythms of the language have within it more of a comic rhythm, or it's a dramatic part, but it's a dark comedy, it's a dark drama. I might lean a bit more towards someone who's got stronger comic chops as opposed to tragic potential, because that's going to be closer to the flavor of the show. If you've got someone who's a great tragic actor or actress, but really doesn't have a feel for comedy and how to blend the two, you might be doing them, yourself, and the show a disservice by erring on the side of the tragedy of the role as opposed to the dark and absurd comic tragedy of the role. Sometimes it's just the hair's breadth of difference that is going to make a determination one way or the other. And it also might boil down to something that an actor would perceive as completely superficial. You know what? They're both great, but I stand both of them next to her and one of them's taller, and that makes a more commanding picture.
I want the person who is closest to the aesthetic that I understand. That's going to give me that depth, or that I may want to be around. someone that I prefer to be with and talk with, that's genial, that's fun to see, that has a good work ethic. And that doesn't mean they're always entertaining, cracking jokes and everything, but they're ready to go to work and on time. And that's the kind of thing that happens in an audition on your way walking in the door. You know, that audition doesn't start when you begin to talk about, when you do your piece. That audition starts the instant I see you.
How exploratory that person feels in looking at that material, how spontaneous that material feels to that person, and you know, I look for who's taking the biggest risks out there. I don't want them to take crazy risks, because that's not what we're going to be asking, but who's taking informed risks in that, and who am I going to trust to do that throughout who's not going to get frustrated with like working on new work.
Since our non-traditional audiences are unbelievably diverse, all kinds of ethnicities, as much as possible I want the cast to look like that. There's not room for divas, 10,000 things, and I mean that in terms of men and women. I want people who know how to keep their personal drama to themselves, and who can be kind and generous and playful and fun to make the ride enjoyable for everybody. You can't always tell that about someone if you don't know them, but if there's a way I can figure that out, I'll tend to go for the person who's just a kinder person.
The agreements that you have, or the budget that you have, you can only have so much you can offer, and one actor may not accept that. Another actor may accept that. Certain actors may not want to work with other actors. And then also, we've developed a certain kind of informal company of actors at MOO. It's not a set, you're not a company member or not a company member. To a certain degree, we want to support those actors. But at the same time, we're always interested in finding new people. And so there's a relative balance of that.
I started my own theater, so I didn't have to audition. I couldn't stand the audition process. And so I try to be as compassionate and understanding in the audition process as I can, because I know how, like a fish out of water, it is. It's the worst circumstance for an actor, who's usually a very sensitive being who likes to understand the context of the world that he's living in. And the context for an actor is a compassionate audience, an interested audience, and a set and a costume and a whole world that you can operate from. That's not there. The opposite is there in the auditioning process, and that is the dispassionate observation of a group of people at a brown table in an empty room that's usually devoid of life. And you're expected to go in there and do something that they will find compelling enough to think you could participate. Whenever I audition, if they pick me, I can't even believe it that they would pick me, because they don't know me. And how would they know what I could do other than this moment which I worked up? So I go, what are their expectations? What could they possibly be? What do they possibly think I could be capable of? No one likes to audition. Auditioning is very difficult because it's a totally unnatural situation, an unnatural setup, where a person comes into a room and in 3 minutes renders some poetic manifestation for a group of people that are sitting at the table and may not at a table and may never even look up at them, or they can't tell how they're responding. It's really not theater, but it's the entry to theater. It's like, oh, I don't know, the entry door to some mystical kingdom that looks like a big bramble bush. So the other thing about auditioning is you come in, you audition, the energy field is that you're being judged for your, quotes, excellence in 2 minutes. And then oftentimes you don't hear from the people. Or 250 other people are all vying for the same one job. So there's a lot of hope and anticipation in the rehearsal process that turns within 2 or 3 days to deep disappointment on the part of 249 actors.
callbacks is much more fun than general auditions, which are grueling for everybody, and they're frustrating, I know, for the actors, because there's sort of that 2-minute you're in and you're out, and it's like, I don't know what happened. And frankly, directors kind of feel the same way sometimes. So it's a quick sort. It's like, oh, this person I can't consider, not going to worry about it. This person I'm really, really curious about or interested in, and then there's usually a big stack. It's like, oh, I don't know. You get into callbacks and you're working with a more select list, and you're really drilling down at that point. And then I certainly am. I'm very much comparing what actor A has done versus what actor B has done, and weighing the relative mass, if you will, or the energies that come out of those evaluations. It's like, well, this has the most capacity to take us where we want to go. Or sometimes an actor will just nail it. And then you're looking at it and say, well, okay, the only way that the next actor is going to be considered is if they're more interesting than the one I love. So they're all different. Callbacks are much more fun because they're more rigorous, and you know you're working on a deeper level with the actors to look for something that you want to invest in together. It's not really usually a plus or minus in terms of the value of the talent itself. It's the fit.
You're called back because clearly you're talented. You're called back because we like you. You're called back because we want to see a little more. I'd say almost in every case where we call somebody back and they don't get in, it's because they couldn't make an adjustment. They couldn't go somewhere different. They couldn't do anything different. We saw something cool. That's not all we're going to do in this piece, or that's not all I'm going to ask for in the rehearsal. So can you give me something else? Can you play? Can you really invest? Can you listen?
You have to work very quickly and manage time very well so that you can see as many relationships as you need to see which ones are really popping. You are comparing, so you have everyone in the room who's going to be playing a role like Eurydice or someone like that. And so they are all watching each other. They're learning from each other. They're young people. And I want them to learn from each other and to expand their choices by watching each other. Then you can really start seeing through contrast which one is the one that resonates with you as a director, because a different director might choose someone else.
I want to know if an actor has the flexibility to do more than what they brought to the audition. And that's an important test for me, even in a first audition. If I have time for that, I always do that. So it's good to be prepared. It's essential to be flexible. And callbacks, if you haven't done it before, you're definitely checking that out in callbacks.
Well, sometimes there's something that you didn't see. You know, this person's incredible with language, incredible with presence, and all this stuff. But ooh, this needs a comic imagination. Can we see that? So you're testing. It's a second chance. A lot less people, a little more time. You get to spend time with the person. Often it's about making an adjustment. It's often about trying that a different way, trying it a different way, trying one more thing.
It's a chance to see how they play well with others.
Some actors, by their constitution, are solo wolves. They don't work well with others. That sounds awful to say, but it is true. They're going to be great people who can lead in this role or that role, but to be married as one of the Three Musketeers is perhaps not the thing for them.
You see finalists next to each other, and that sort of helps you formulate the decision, because unlike the initial auditions, which you may see 60 people over the course of a day, at callback auditions you see 3 finalists in the course of a half an hour next to each other, and it just helps you crystallize your thinking.
Well, sometimes they'll do it better than you could have staged it. And I'm always looking for people who are inventive and playful, and they have a creative impulse that if you don't see it in an audition, you're not going to get it in a rehearsal process. So I want people who come in who are willing to play, and I tell them that off the bat.
I learn a lot from auditions and callbacks about the play that I'm going to direct. I always discover something where an actor will do something I never thought of before. It's like, well, yeah, we should use that. Even if we don't cast that actor, we should use that.
Everybody's in the theater, and we read the whole play, and we daisy chain reading through the whole play. So everybody gets to hear the play, which is a gift, and they get to be able to see as clearly as I can who should be playing the part because it becomes obvious. So it's a little bit more transparent. No one wonders why they didn't get the part. It's because the light didn't fall on them. The inspiration, the light of understanding and inspiration did not light on them. That's how it appears to me. You can see it. It's like a light comes on these people and they become the one. Because the deal is that if you're going to cast from auditions, the players are in that body of 200 people. Your job is to find out who are they.
It's a play about 3 couples. You've got to get those 3 couples in the room just to make sure that what they were doing individually, they can actually do together. Because I'll tell you, sometimes they cannot, and they will not.
Are they capable of the hard stuff? An emotional scene, a mad outburst, a big monologue. If it's a comedic role, can they do the funniest scene? If the arc of their character goes from A to Z, I want to see both ends of it.
It's a really, really rigorous physical or emotional role. Then you're looking for someone that has the reservoir, you know, somewhere in there, and you need enough hints of that. You don't need them to conquer it in the audition, but you need to believe they have the capacity, and you're checking for that. You are testing their ability to rethink something, to try something, and their willingness to try something.
One should come in with that mindset of, you know, I don't know what they're looking for, and frankly, they don't necessarily know what they're looking for because it's new material, and so let's play. You know, let's see where this goes.
Rest assured that if one person isn't as good an actor, I know that, and I take that into account, but I'm really interested to see, you know, how the actor can adjust to that and what kind of generous accommodations they can make maybe to someone that isn't as good. But I'm really capable of watching 2 actors at once and taking in different things. So that's a part of it. It's just how do you play with other people. I really am interested in what an actor brings just to his first reading of a part, and it doesn't have to necessarily be at all what I'm thinking of. I mean, it's fun to see when people bring other things, and oftentimes I get really good ideas.
Okay, from what I remember, what I wrote down in my notes, my brief notes, let's bring that person back to make sure that I'm right, or that I think I'm right, or, you know, what I saw is what I saw. Well, I want to make sure that my memory is right. I might bring someone back who I thought, you know, it wasn't quite there. I'm going to bring them back and push them a little bit and see if I can get something more.
You have to take the opportunities that come to you, no matter what they may be. Audition everywhere. Take any little play, anything that comes. Come here, do an internship, do it with one play, be an acting intern. You can probably be in one of the bigger plays. Work backstage, get to know the theater. If you love the theater, work in the box office, volunteer, be willing, be able. Something will happen.
Just keep building the muscle. And if you don't get any work, get a group of people together and make a project, you know. And if you're spending all your time with a day gig, you know, carve out the time, you know. It's hard. It's really, really hard. But if you love it enough to do this crazy life, then you should think about yourself as someone, because hopefully your whole life is in training. The great thing about our field is, you know, every project's hopefully new. Every project stretches you in some way that's surprising, that gives you new muscles. I mean, we're so lucky to be in this field, which turns us into lifelong learners.
Today is the good old days, that it is the right time to join the field. The field is really seeking people who are digital natives, who can really change the way in which we do what we do. In terms of audience finding, everybody in America is trying to find the audiences in their 20s. And so they need to be, part of the way they need to do that is do programming that speaks to people in their 20s, and those are the actors in their 20s. So at a time in the world where one can see what they want to see, when they want to see it for free on their laptop or phone or iPad, you know, the digital native wins. And so we just need to change the way we do what we want to do. But I completely believe that this is the right time to join the professional American theater and succeed.
If you don't know what you want to do in acting, then do a lot of things. to try to find your path. And once you've found your path, study. Study, 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 study.
Never stop working. Painters never stop painting, you know? And by that I mean athletes never stop training. So you're an athlete of the mind, you're an athlete of the soul, you're an athlete of the voice, you're an athlete of the body, you're an athlete of the spirit.
I would look for audition pieces that really excite you. It could be a novel that you were assigned in English that you love the character. Go through that novel, find the pages where that character talks a lot. See if you can piece something together. Because if you felt something when you read that novel, chances are your attachment or your connection to that character will read when you perform it.
Learn to fail. Learn to fail, because 90% of the time you will not be cast, maybe 95%. And just learn what that means. It doesn't mean you are a failure at all. It means someone else came along who's suited better. So learning to fail is really key. To keep your self-esteem intact, your joy intact, and to understand it's okay that I wasn't cast.
Take the work seriously, but not take yourself too seriously. I think it's important to do your homework and to be disciplined about your work, but also leave a little room for spontaneity.
I mean, if you really love doing it, you'll continue to do it no matter what level it's at. You know, you're gonna, if you really love doing it and you haven't quite been able to break a professional barrier, you're gonna do it at community theater level, and you're gonna spend a lot of time doing it, and it's great.
You don't wait for other people to give you opportunities. That can be so discouraging. You should certainly be pursuing them, but don't let it be your only avenue. I'd say if you're a younger actor who's coming out of a program or coming into town and knocking on the doors of the established theaters, but are maybe either still a little too young or too, shall we say, maybe still growing in your development or unknown to gain traction there, find some like-minded friends. Do your own shows, whether it's a fringe show or something at a bar or in a basement that's only going to run for 2 weeks. That work, even though it's going to take your energy, is going to give you an opportunity to exercise and develop your skills. It is also very likely going to be a thing that gains you attention you might not otherwise have received. I do think it means something to many of us locally who are in a casting or a producing position to see that, oh, here are some actors who are creative and motivating agents in the local ecology. You know, they're devising their own work, they're making their own shows, they're casting themselves. That's an entrepreneurial spirit that is very attractive to have in anybody's production.
Learn, go talk to people, come over, see me, call me up, I'll have lunch with you, it doesn't matter. Just be involved in it without expectation, because the theater does not have a lot to offer in the way of money. The theater has a lot to offer in the way of an incredible experience with other people in the form of an audience and with fellow artists when you're creating a play.
What you're really doing is building a lifetime of relationships. And you need to have, if you can have that perspective, then the many, many no's that you get are simply put into a larger context. And they're not as important. And they shouldn't be, because producers and directors say no for all kinds of reasons, and it's really usually that they're just not saying yes. They're saying yes to somebody else.
Because you're freelance, and even if you have an agent, you need to work 40 hours a week. It's a full-time job every week, and the freelancer that does that wins. It's no question. Not many people do it. And what does that mean? You have 5 or 6 prepared pieces that you can have at your beck and call so you can get called. You have a website that is updated with what you're doing with your headshot, with your resume, with clips from commercial work if you do it, voice work if you do it, stage work, which Equity is now, and the various unions are allowing more of that online presence. So somebody, and your audition pieces should be on your website too. And then you go and get a job whether it's an industrial film or a commercial or a voiceover or a stage job, and you keep a log of all the people who you work with, and you maintain a relationship that isn't a you've got a job, I want a job relationship, that are actually two humans connecting. And if one puts 40 hours a week into it every week, having their material polished, having their website up to date, working it, not sitting around waiting for an agent to call or the phone to ring or playlist to show what the next audition is, you win. And to me, there's no question that that person will have more opportunity. Whether they are able to capitalize on that is still up to them and how good they are. But if you're working on your craft, an individual freelance artist is like a corporation. You have three things: product, research, and marketing. And so your talent is your product. So you want to make sure your pieces are at the top of your game. If you're a singer, you want to have your voice strong. If you're a musician, you want to make sure those things are part of your arsenal. Your research is who's doing what. You know what? I saw this play and there's a part perfect for me. I'm going to find out who in America is doing that play, and I'm going to get my stuff in their hands and saying, I'm the person you want playing that part. And you just work it, and then you market it. So that's what I'm saying. You find out where are the jobs, you find out who are the people that are creating with them, and treat them as people, not as wallets. And then you market your stuff and let them know you're there. And if you treat yourself as an individual, as a full business with product, marketing, and research, you win. And that's true of a 22-year-old or a 52-year-old or an 82-year-old.